I bet you thought you'd see Jacques here, but he's not here. He said he had too much to do in his garden, so I figured I'd laugh alone. Just like I cry alone sometimes, guys. Today, I'm taking you through all the tomatoes and peppers that are currently in my plan to start in the garden. We'll discuss how I'm starting them, why I'm growing the ones I'm growing, why I'm mixing it up a little bit. This year's gonna be quite a bit different as far as my tomato pepper strategy. A lot of the stuff I wanna grow, it's for preservation, it's for transformation, and of course, there's some fresh eating stuff as well. So I've got everything labeled up in the greenhouse. Sit back, relax, enjoy. It's Tomato and Pep starting sesh. The greenhouse is starting to get packed, absolutely packed. Nearly no room on the main seedling table. Unfortunately, I think I lost this Monstera Thai constellation. It's gotten completely roasted, absolutely roasted, and the water's fine in there. It was fine for like over a year, so I'm very bummed about that. Check this out, running some horseradish right now. We're gonna be trying to grow this, see how this goes. So looks like it's off to a good start. Running an interesting experiment over here with basil, showing some different pruning strategies. And then the overwintered peppers down here are starting to kick off. But today we're gonna be talking about this tray right here. I'm gonna be using the Epic 16 cells. I wanna try these out for bulk tomato and pepper sowing. So that's what I'm doing. And the big pile of seeds is right here. Let's kick into it. So what I've done is I have my peppers right here and I have my tomatoes right here. There's two different groups for both. The green labeled tomatoes this year are going to be what are called my storage tomato experiments. So all of these came from a company called Heirloom Seed House. Not an ad or anything like that. It's just one of the few places we could find these. There is the classic Principe Borghese. Don't hate me, Italians, but I'm just gonna go off on these because they're all Italian varieties. We've got Pianola Vesuvio Yellow, Corbarino, Rosati Benevento, Crispiania, Grappoli di Inverno. This is so bad. Pianola Vesuvio Red, Can or Anetore, and then Borgo Celano. So what is the deal with all of these? Well, I got obsessed the second I saw it with this idea of the storage tomato. These would be tomatoes. Principe Borghese, I believe, is the first one that it, of course, originates from Italy, these varieties. These are varieties that have thicker skin, slightly lower water content in the tomato itself, and they're designed to be harvested when maybe a little bit half ripe or so, maybe the breaker stage of tomato, and then hung, basically. So we'll put some photos up for you. It's very interesting the way that these are stored because in good conditions, they are a 3-month store from harvest in room temp or in just normal temperatures, not in the fridge or anything like that. So I have split my tomatoes really into 3 categories this year. One would be the normies. I've got my Cherokee Carbon, my beefsteaks, my slicers, etc. 2 would be my sauce, and I'm going all in on San Marzano yet again. And then 3 would be my storage. So over on Jacques' channel, he decided to do kind of like a stutter step strategy where he's got his early tomatoes, his mid tomatoes, his late tomatoes. I'm kind of doing like a category style strategy this year where I'm doing for different use cases, starting different types of tomatoes and arguably even at different times. We're gonna start one batch right now. So the way I'm gonna grow these this year, at least start them, is gonna be in the 16 cells. I really recommend pre-labeling. So I just go variety and date. If I know I'm doing a tray of all tomatoes, I know what a tomato looks like by now. I don't really need to label the actual plant name. And I'm gonna go 2 seeds per hole here because I don't have a lot of these seeds. With the 16 cells, I just do a slight depression and I just drop 2 seeds in. I do all my covering later on. So I'm gonna fill out this entire channel here, this entire tray set, and then I'll cover up just so I make sure I don't miss any cells. We have a 16 cell dibber on the way, but for now, I'm just gonna use an eraser of a pencil, which I don't know the last time I've actually used a pencil for its own purposes. I only use them for these weird gardening use cases these days. By the way, I'm using a sifted Fox Farm soil mix here. So this is not a soil mix like a seed starting mix. It's just a standard off-the-shelf mix that I've brought down in particle size. And when I'm doing tomatoes or peppers or most plants in something like a 16 cell, I'm gonna go a little deeper than the packet might recommend. So I'm probably gonna go down a 1/4 inch or so, just a touch deeper because the cells are small and they're likely to dry out just a touch faster. This is like little seed starting tip tricks, but I like to pre-label the cells if I can, just so I can track and I make sure I didn't forget anything, but you don't have to do it this way. The idea I got to start the tomatoes and peppers in 16s instead of something like our standard 6 or 4 cells is because I met this guy, Jim Duffy. Refining Fire Chilies, I believe, was his brand. He's since moved out of California, but we had a great year of peppers using some of his starts, and he was bulk starting because of course he has his own, nursery, so he needs to do it in bulk at volume. And he just had a ton of success starting peppers. He didn't do tomatoes, but he did peppers in 16 cells and then just fertilizing from the bottom or even the top as those peppers matured. And we're talking, we had peppers that were like maybe 6 to 8 inches tall out of Jim's setup. And I figured it's a little bit more space efficient to try it out. So we'll see how it works. If I like it, maybe I'll stick with it. If not, maybe I'll go back to the 6 cell method. But of course, with 16 cells in a 1020, there's still 8 of them that fit. So it's 8 times 16 as opposed to 12 times 6, which is what you've got in the 6 cells. So you just get a lot more planting volume out of this. The typical way I would have used these though would be if I was doing flowers. So if I was doing like a cut flower garden or a lot of different flowers, because I'm more likely to sprinkle flowers around more areas of the garden. Of course, I'm not typically going to be harvesting those, right? And so if I'm doing the flowers, then I want volume. I want a ton of seeds. And with tomatoes, of course, if I was to do this whole tray, like I'd be a literal tomato farmer, and I'm not ready to be that yet. Although I think with the amount that Jacques steals, he might want me to be. We'll see. Don't go over to his channel and throw some shade at him, guys. Definitely don't do that. So I have my storage tomatoes in. I'm excited about them. I'm doing 1 per. If I see germination failure with any of these, I will restart. But right now I'm just going to be growing 1 of those per, trying to determine, first of all, do I even like the concept? Second of all, do storage tomatoes like work in my area? And if so, is there one that works in particular? Now that we've got the fancy ones out of the way, I'm going to go in with the basics, the Sun Gold Pole Cherry Tomato. I said I wouldn't, but I'm gonna do it. And the reasoning is pretty simple. I have yet to find a cherry that outperforms. The thing that I'm starting to not enjoy so much sometimes about the Sun Gold is that it's a very delicate skinned cherry tomato. I don't know if you guys have noticed that, but you tend to have to eat it pretty quickly after you harvest it. Otherwise, you'll get splitting on the cherry. Now, is that the worst thing in the world? Not really, because these guys go pretty fast once they're harvested. I'll just say that much. But I would prefer to find at least one alternative cherry tomato that has a little bit thicker skin, not to the level of the storage tomatoes like I was just telling you about, but just something where I could theoretically leave it out for a day or two on the counter and I wouldn't come back to little popped skin, just because, I want a little more storage out of it. Now, there's a couple more tomatoes that I'm going to start. One of them I'm very, very excited about. This is from a friend of mine. His name's Ryan. He holds records in West Virginia for a lot of plants, as far as like giant plants. And so this is his own crossed and saved tomato seed. So he grew a 2-pound, 5-ounce tomato off of this. He said, I'm horrible at growing giant tomatoes for some reason. 2 pounds, 5 ounces, Ryan, that's decent. So I've got it labeled as giant tomato. We'll throw it in right here and we'll see how it goes. It's a cross between Jolivet and Howell, self-cross. I never tried this out. These seeds are a couple years old. I really hope that it takes. So when you have a situation like that, almost dropped all the seeds, you want to overseed. I know that my germination rate has fallen. I'm going to put 5 of these seeds in here just to make sure that unless I have complete non-viability on these seeds, the chances that all 5 don't germinate, even at a low germination rate, something like 50%, it's very low. So I'm excited to see if it works. I'm curious if any of you guys have grown giant tomatoes. Now I'm going to run you through the rest of what I would call like the more basic style tomatoes. I'm going to get pretty crazy with my sauce garden. So my sauce garden is actually going to be one entire flat right here. So I'm going to come in with the pencil and do 16 depressions, and I'm going San Marzanos, and I always plant these in a different area of the garden. And it's a new development for me. I didn't like when I mixed the two, my eaters and my saucers, as I like to call it. So I'm gonna go 16. I don't know that I'm gonna use all 16, but come on. If you have tomatoes and you have too many, no friend of yours is gonna be mad if you have to give a couple away. You know, I'm sure Jacques will probably come by and grab a few of these, but I like the San Marzano because of course it's one of the more classic sauce tomatoes. You can use something like an Amish paste if you want to. I've just had so much success in my area with San Marzanos. And that's what I want to talk about next is what we've been noticing over the years is there's so much variance in how well a particular variety of a tomato or even a pepper, come on now, get out of my hand, will perform for you in your climate that you have to test. I would say in the first year or two of your garden in any new climate, say you moved, right? I would be testing out 20 different varieties and just seeing what happens. Of course, you need to have the space for that. So if you don't have the space, what I might do is hit up a local nursery or even a local Facebook group and just ask what particular varieties do really well. There's a few, Jacques actually just got a spreadsheet sent in by one of you watching of probably the most in-depth tomato experiment I've ever seen in our climate here in San Diego. We're talking measuring weight, height, wind conditions, weather, yields, disease resistance, all that kind of stuff. And what it revealed was pretty telling. There's some varieties that you would think do really well. They did not perform well here in our climate in San Diego. So I was very surprised by that. So what I'm trying to say is there might be 4,000 different varieties of tomatoes, and there's so many different varieties of climates and regions that you need to make sure you pick varieties that work really well for you. So let's say, you know, for me, the Cherokee Carbon, which is the one I'm planting right now, is one that for whatever reason does really well in my area. And then like Cherokee Purple or perhaps another heirloom hybrid cross does really poorly. I would never know that just by looking at the back of the packet. I just wouldn't. And you'd be surprised at the variance in performance. So I'm gonna do 3 Cherokee Carbons here because that is my default beefsteak for the season. So I'm going to put a couple extra probably in the ground. May not use them all again, but I'd rather have these backups. Last year, I planted my tomatoes a little bit too early, started them a little too early. And if you remember, I had to plant them all quite deep in order to make them work. And my first crop of tomatoes for the season wasn't super strong. So I ended up planting a backup crop and had a much better harvest out of it. So the final 2 in a world of tomatoes that I'm gonna be planting are the Oxheart Pole Tomato and the Brandywine. And this is one of our blends. So this is the yellow and red blend. If you don't like that, well, we've got a little treat for you because you can actually tell which one is which. We stain the red one with an organic dye. It's actually just beet juice. So I'll see if I can show you here. If you look really close, you can see there's just a little staining on some of these. And so now that's how I know, it's really 2 seeds in one, what I'm gonna get. So I'm gonna go 1 red, 1 yellow, and I'm gonna double up on the Oxheart. I don't know what it is, but the Oxheart tomato, I just really like the volume of that tomato. I think it's a very large, very sort of bulky, proud tomato, if you wanna say that. And I want one of those in my garden this year. Even the seeds on the Oxheart are a decent size. Let's talk now about the peppers that I'm starting. I'm starting way more peppers, I think, than tomatoes. And this first batch, again, is coming from Heirloom Seed House. These are not what you call storage peppers like the tomatoes were, because peppers, by and large, are good storers. But some of these will be grown for the purpose of drying and storing, although most of my drying, storing peppers are in the pack behind me. We're gonna start out with these first. Most of these have ají in the name, which is of course a South American style pepper. They range from 1,000 to 50,000 Scoville, although there are much hotter ones as well. And I will see if I can get a picture up for every single one of these that I'm growing, but some of them we may not have some photos of. They're all very interesting peppers, lots of flavor profile to this, and I just haven't grown a lot of the ají styles, so I have a lot of them. I'm not committed to planting every single one, but I do want the option. My peppers, I will throw all in their own flat as well. So sometimes when I'm starting seeds, I don't run out of space. Like for example, these front 2 rows right here, they still could be planted, but that's a tomato tray and I've run out of tomatoes to plant, or I've planted all the tomatoes I want to plant. So I'm not going to pollute it with the peppers, right? It's just an organizational thing. You don't have to use all the space. It's easier on my mind to remember that all these 3 trays with these labels in them, it's just all tomatoes, even if there's nothing growing right here. And you know what? I may find a couple tomatoes that I want to plant. So we're going to start out with the ají style, and we're going to go with ají norteño. And you know what? I'm not as familiar with the intricacies of every variety here, but I am going to go in with 2 seeds per hole on these because I do want guaranteed germ. And whenever I'm trying out a new seed company, I want to make sure that I get germ. And now I'm not saying that, you know, Heirloom Seed House has poor germ or anything like that. I just don't know. Next one I'm going in with is a variety called Hinkle Hats. I have no idea what this one looks like, but I had to get it for the name alone. So we're going in with Hinkle Hats and we'll see what happens. Now, if it's kind of like a Mad Hatter pepper, I'll be very pleased because I'm a fan of that variety. I think it looks very unique, very interesting. It's also very prolific in my climate. I finally got a little cloud cover so I can sit here and chill and plant with you guys. Hopefully you're enjoying this style. Let me know. And hopefully you're doing some planting yourself. It's getting to be that season, guys. I can't believe it, but spring is officially almost here. 21st is going to be our spring equinox. What did I just plant even? Black Hungarian, yet another one I have yet to try out. So every year, and I know I say this a lot, but I go into different phases for different crops, specifically the big, you know, kind of juicy summer crops that everyone likes to grow, peppers, tomatoes. There's so many varieties of these. You could live a whole life and you'd never grow them all. So I want to give myself a shot at least making a dent in growing some of them. So this year I'm growing a lot more. Some years I contract the varieties that I'm doing, some years I expand. This year I'm doing an expansion because it's just been a while since I've grown some stuff that I'm really, you know, kind of jazzed about and ready to experiment with. I also had a lot of success last year with my paprika. I was doing paprika. You know what I'm thinking about? Why am I planting these trays front to back? That's just so obnoxious to plant in, but learn from my mistake and don't do it that way. Next up is ají dulce. Dulce meaning, I believe, candy. I would imagine this is on the sweeter side and perhaps not as hot, although you never know with some of these names. I'm very excited this year, going back to the paprika, to do a lot more pepper drying and transformations, whether it's making more paprika, which I'm most definitely going to do, and you'll see the varieties that I'm choosing for that pretty soon here, but also certain spice blends and mixes. I'm going to see if I can pull it off. And I've got a better technique for drying the peppers this year. Last year, threw some sort of string through the caps and had some issues with mold on some of them, lost a good amount of certain crops. The one I had the most success with was the Thai chili. I think it's just because it's such a small pepper. It doesn't tend to rot out, but some of those larger peppers I did have some problems with. So I am going to plant a pretty hot variety. This is red habanero. I don't know the Scoville on this particular variety, but habaneros they're up there for sure. So we're going to get that in the ground. I'm not doing a lot of hot peppers though this year. I'm really not. And if I do, I'm probably going to do it for the purpose of turning it into some sort of spice blend. Because the truth is, I don't have a crazy spice tolerance, and I don't want to grow a bunch of spicy peppers and have no clue what to do with them, right? So I do have a few, and I'm gonna use those for dried preparations. This one's ají Guyana, imagining that it is hailing from the nation it is named after. I do have ají mango. I did also put in, let's see, yeah, the red habanero, and then Oriola Sella. Again, some of these I'm kind of just taking a gamble with, and we'll see what happens here. I got my more normal peppers to show you in a bit. So the last unique one that's going in is Violet Sparkle. This one, colorful and interesting. It's been quite a while since I've grown the more kind of interesting varieties, the more spectacle ornamentally types. This isn't a pure ornamental, of course, but just something a little bit unique. Okay, and we go with the more, what I would call production peppers, the ones that I'm pretty confident will work, the ones that I've grown for years, the ones that I like and I'm excited to grow in a more, harvesting sense. So we're starting out though with a curveball, right as I say all that. Again, from my friend Ryan, this is a heavy chili pepper from the world record pepper. This is a Davies. It says this would be the state record if West Virginia tracked it. Ryan is from West Virginia, and like I mentioned, he holds all the West Virginia giant vegetable records. So we'll see. I haven't experimented with giant peppers, giant plants really in general in a while. I think if I really wanted a shot at making this one an absolute giant, I would have started this a touch earlier, but you know what, it's all good. We'll see if we get this to work. Again, a seed that's a couple years old, I'm gonna go in with double the amount I'd normally sow per cell. So we're gonna go in with 4, just to make sure I get germ. I'll tap those down there, label it up. That's really the only totally oddball pepper I'm growing in this bunch. I'm going in with some of the more classic stuff now. So if you're a beginner gardener watching this, beginner homesteader, then I recommend the ones that I'm about to show you, because these ones just have a lot more reliability for the gardener. So this is going to be Megatron jalapeno. This is a fantastic variety, probably my favorite jalapeno variety these days, because it's a reliable producer. It is quite big, as the name implies. They can get 4.5 inches long, so quite long, especially for a jalapeno. And to me, maybe it's because I live in Southern California, the jalapeno is like the workhorse pepper of the kitchen, right? Like salsas, all sorts of different sandwiches and preparations that you can make with it. So the bigger, the better. Now, I do have a absolute favorite pepper for versatility, for snackability, for the cooking aspect of it, and that is the shishito. This is just a standard shishito variety right here. I am a huge fan of this. I typically plant 2 of these per season, because I find that 1 doesn't quite give me enough. 2, if I grow it well, will give me more than enough for the year. And the way I almost always use these is if I'm doing like a backyard grilling session, I will just do a blistered shishito. So I'll throw them on, I have a Blackstone grill, I'll throw them on the Blackstone grill, and then I'll just blister them, salt, maybe a little sesame oil or something like that, and I'm good to go. So the way I do this, instead of writing like multiple labels, is if I'm doing multiple cells, I'll just pick a sort of format. So what I know here is if this is unlabeled, but a seed is coming up out of this one, it's going to be applied to the tag to the right of it. So the shishitos, of course, are going to be both of these cells right here, since I'm planting 2 of them. Next up, I have one that Jacques, I want to say, I don't know who grew this first, but it was either me without knowing it or him, but he certainly put me onto these in a bigger way, and this would be the Biquino peppers. So this is another one of our blends. I'm a fan of this sort of seed pack style. It's a yellow and red, stained in the same way. So the beet juice tells you that it is a red one. The natural coloration of the seed tells you that it is a yellow one. So there we go. I'm gonna do just 1 of each. It's really still 2 Biquinos. I just want the variety here. So the thing I like about peppers is they really just, the varieties are just all over the world. So this is Golden Marconi. This one will go 6 to 10 inches. I'll show you the packet right here. Very, very sweet pepper, resistant to a couple diseases that peppers can suffer from. And just, I don't know, it's just a really nice one. And I'm more of a sweet pepper guy. So I'm gonna be growing 2 of these just because I'm optimistic. I'm pretty sure these are gonna work out well for me. So I'll plant 2 just to see how they go. And then we're gonna move into a variety that I've grown, but it's been a while, and it goes into my strategy for the preserved stuff this year. So the dried peppers. See if I can get that in there. There we go. We're struggling out here. So this is Pasilla Bajo, or Bajío, excuse me. So Pasilla means little raisin, apparently, in Spanish. I should know that. My Spanish is decent, as I mispronounced that, but it actually is decent. So let me read the back here really quickly. So pasilla means little raisin in Spanish, referring to the dark brown wrinkled dried form of the chilaca pepper. Fresh chilaca adds depth to red enchilada sauce and salsas. The dried pod or pasilla is a flavorful, important ingredient in mole sauce. I have yet to make mole sauce, but one time I was down in Mexico City with my cousin. It was many years ago now. And we went to a restaurant called Pujol, which I believe the head chef's name is Enrique Olvera. He was on chef's table. We kind of saved up and we went down there and we had his 1,000-year mole or 500-year mole. I forgot what it was called. And that turned me on to mole. I hadn't really had it much before. So if I can grow a pepper that is, you know, a common ingredient in mole and perhaps make my own this year, I'll be very, very pleased. So that goes my first sort of drying, preserving pepper. Here's my next one here. This is the poblano pepper, or the ancho pepper, of course, when it is dried. Take a look at this guy right here. I like that the packet art on this one shows you both states of the pepper. So all my dried ones, because I don't have to use them fresh, right? I can plant more of these peppers, provided I have the space, and I can actually deal with the volume of the harvest that I'm gonna get. So for each of my dried varieties, I'm going with at least 2 pepper plants because I want that volume, right? They're gonna dry, they're gonna, dry down. Perhaps if I turn them into spice mixes, they're gonna certainly shrink down a lot in volume, and I want enough that I can be using this throughout the non-pepper growing season, which is why I'm doing that. Okay, for those of you who have shorter seasons, I would recommend this one maybe over the Megatron. So it's going to come a lot earlier. Cool climates love it. It's 3 inches instead of the 4.5 that the Megatron can get to, and it works really well. So if you struggle, maybe you're in a low zone, you still want to grow peppers, I might get the early, like right now, and get it going. I only need one of these this season because I've got quite a few other peppers, and I also have the Megatron, and I know that works really well for me, but I still do want to try this out. And I'm thinking this will give me a little bit of air cover over the part of the season where I don't have the Megatron jalapenos coming yet, but we'll have to find out. Next up, I'm going with a classic, maybe a little bit boring, but this is just a Serrano. I need something that's a touch spicier than a jalapeno. Jalapeno, maybe 2,000 to 8,000 Scoville. This is 10 to 20,000. So it is just a little bit hotter. And I would say, as far as my daily eating goes, that's roughly my max. I don't really need to eat much more than that, but I am gonna do just one of these. I don't feel like I want a ton of Serrano this season, so I'm just gonna throw one in there, and I'm good on that guy. Now I've got the Padron pepper right here. Think of it as more as like a Spanish style shishito. It kind of has that gamble going on with it where 1 in every 10 shishito are hot, 1 in every 8, something like that. In this case, it's somewhat similar, but they're not very hot. They're like 1,000, 2,500 Scoville, but we're gonna give it a shot and see how it goes. I'm not really sure what I'm gonna use the Padron for, but I just want it. So sometimes you just gotta grow what you want, Okay, now we're moving into some of the drying peppers, the ones that I'm gonna try making into paprika. I'm doing a whole tray of these. I'll do 4 of each because they don't grow very many per plant. So if you're, a keen gardener, you probably already know what I'm talking about here. But I'm talking about the world of the sweet peppers, specifically the bigger ones like the bell pepper. So this is California Wonder right here. This is, of course, great for my climate. I'm in California, but unbeknownst to me, before I made my paprika that very first year, you can use pretty much any sweet pepper to make paprika. Now there are better ones. I believe the OG is kind of the Hungarian sweet peppers or the Hungarian bells. Those are the ones that I did it with that one time, and it worked really, really well. So I'm just gonna do a row. Oops, this is California Wonder, not golden. I'm just gonna do a row 4 each, and that's because bells only produce, I don't know, 3 to 5 bells per plant, and I really want a lot of paprika. Last year I got 1 jar, and it just wasn't enough. So I want a lot more. I'm gonna grow a lot more. So I'll have 16 bells. That would give me an estimated yield of somewhere around 48 to 85-ish peppers, which should be enough to make all the paprika that I want. So the next one I'm going with is Golden California Wonder. And I'm sorry about the lighting, guys, but it's challenging filming here in the greenhouse in the middle of the day. The light just throws all over the place, but it is what it is. So Golden California Wonder is just, of course, the yellow version. In fact, on the back of the packet, it says start out green, ripen to sunburst yellow, and then a blush of orange. So I'm gonna try to get these when they are yellow and then dry them, but I suspect they'll just ripen anyways a little bit, and we'll see what we get. But if I can get a different color and different variety, I'm assuming that means slightly different flavor profile, which means maybe my paprika is going to be a little bit more varied and delicious and interesting to grow and to consume. Let's get that guy in there. What I like about using the pencil too is you can just nudge a seed in that didn't quite make it in the hole. Next up we have Orange Sun. So we're going straight down bell pepper alley right now. I have never grown probably this many different varieties of bells in a single season. I typically stick to a more basic setup and maybe just greens or red bell peppers. Of course, you can let them ripen through those stages and harvest them at various stages, and you've got a nice variety that you can deal with. But this year, you know what? It's about what I tend to use more. And I tend to use a bell pepper more than like 700 different hot peppers. Now, if you were Paul on the team, it might be a little different. He's a bit of a spice guy and he's a big pepper guy, but For me, I'm just not. So important lesson to grow what you're actually going to consume. Now, this one is not a bell. This one is a sweet banana pepper. So this is a Hungarian heirloom from 1941. Now this is a pickling style pepper. Remember those little like Tuscany jars of olive oil with like peppers and carrots in it that you used to get like if you went over to someone's house in the 90s? Because everyone's house, at least in Southern California, everyone's house was like Tuscan style. I don't know why, like it was that movie Under the Tuscan Sun that that got everyone on this train, but aesthetically, that wasn't the vibe for me. It wasn't the vibe for me. I didn't like that style, but everyone had it. Anyways, I'm growing this guy. I'm gonna try some pickled peppers this year. I do want to even try some pepperoncinis, but I don't have the seeds right now. So this is gonna have to do. And we're going in with 4 of those as well. So a good rule of thumb is like anything you are in preservation mode on or transformation mode, like you're really not gonna eat it fresh, you're gonna try to do something with it, I would grow more of those. The ones that you're gonna eat fresh, unless you know you're growing an absolute boatload of those, or you're gonna eat a boatload of those, I wouldn't grow that many of those varieties. So I have my tray, it's crazy. I mean, all the peppers and tomatoes, for the most part, for my whole garden this year, are just in this one 1020 universal bottom tray with 8 of the 16 cell trays. Really cool. We have a couple new things coming for these too. So there's gonna be a plug popper that pops these all out. And there's some individual domes and trays if you don't have a big enough garden, you just want like a few of these. We're gonna launch that pretty soon. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. I had a lot of fun getting in the greenhouse over the weekend and planting these out. I'm excited to see how these go. And I hope you are too. And until next time, guys, good luck in the garden and keep on growing.